Thank you for the opportunity to share with you a few words about the upcoming verses for June 30th. The lessons are from the 3rd chapter of Lamentations, Psalm number 30, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 7 to 15, and then Mark 5, 21 to 43. Just a few words about Lamentations. These verses are often seen as the only message of hope in the entire book of Lamentations. It's suspected that they're being used by the writer to encourage the Lord to act according to the promises he made to Israel, to be steadfast in his love and faithfulness. Of course, God always is. But these verses remind us that as humans, we cry out and sometimes remind God of God's promises. Or is it more likely we're reminding ourselves of God's promises? We'll find out next Sunday. The 30th Psalm is a psalm about Thanksgiving. In particular, Thanksgiving for recovery from a very serious illness. The passages are remarkable. They're about being rescued from a near-death crisis. They're about God's faithfulness and love that are far more deep and enduring than God's short anger, brief anger. But again, if God's angry, it's because God's wanting to bring about changes in sinful human behavior. How many times have you felt a similar situation where you were angry, you were upset? Anger is just a surface emotion. There's a wish and a dream, and it's like God. God gets angry because God has a wish and a dream for God's people. I get angry, and it's because I have a wish and a dream for the people of God here at St. John's. But I love the ending. Turn things from mourning, mourning, from mourning, sadness, grief, to dancing. That sounds pretty fun. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. It's a great passage. This one's a little bit tougher. I think it's tough because it talks about the economic relationships between Christian congregations, in particular, how Paul was inviting and asking folks to make a collection, an offering, to balance out those with abundance and those who are living in scarcity, but not as a punitive measurement, not as an economic equilibrium, but because for those of us who have been given much, there is an act of generosity that is not unlike the widow's mite, someone who had very little, but she was extraordinarily generous. 2 Corinthians it's a tough text. It's about encouraging people to be generous. And people are. I think when people are asked, they oftentimes are. It's the asking. And Paul's asking. Paul's not afraid to ask the congregation. We need what you have so that we can do the ministry that we want to do. It's regrettable for congregations when there's really no need to ask. It makes ministry all the more difficult, and it allows people to not actually grow in their faith without much harder work, much more diligent work. It's much harder to work with a congregation that has been blessed with much than it is to work with a congregation that's blessed with little. There's a difference. There's a big difference, and I suspect you already know what the difference is. The gospel from Mark 5, a woman who was suffering from a hemorrhage. I think the neat part about this, the really cool part about this is she was suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years. Jairus' daughter was 12 years old. The one needed the bleeding to stop. The other one, by coming back to life, was given the opportunity to bleed. And in doing so, an opportunity to bear children, to bear life. 2 women healed, and maybe even perhaps cured, but they were healed. I'll talk about that for sure next Sunday. Be blessed.